Hey folks, Christy here from Death, Lies, and Alibis. Today we're doing something a little different. I sat down with Christy Collins, that's Ronnie's daughter. She's one of the voices still fighting for answers in a double homicide that rocked the small town of Roseville, Ohio. Nearly 2 decades ago, Ronnie and Connie Collins were found murdered inside their burnt home. A crime scene was lost, evidence disappeared, and to this day, no one has been held accountable. What you're about to hear isn't theory. It's her truth, raw, unfiltered, and long overdue. Christy, I want to thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start at the beginning. How did you first hear about what happened to your dad and Connie?
My brother Chuck called me at 6 a.m. the morning of March 8th, 2007. That's how I found out something was wrong, but it was Connie's daughter, Stacy, who was actually notified first by firefighters, and then she called my brothers.
That had to be such a surreal moment, getting that kind of news so early, not knowing yet how bad it really was. What do you remember seeing when you first got to the scene?
The house was completely burned to the ground. There was literally nothing standing, just ashes and debris.
Nothing left. It's so hard to even process how fast everything was taken from you all. Did investigators ever look for accelerants or signs of forced entry or things like that?
They said they did, but initially it was all treated as an accident. It took 3 months to realize it was actually arson and homicide. By then, it was too late to find any clear evidence of chemicals or forced entry.
3 months is an unimaginable delay in a case like this. Now, you mentioned the autopsy results came later. What stood out the most to you?
June 4th, 2007, when we got the autopsy reports. My dad was shot in the head. Connie was shot 3 times. They said they died from the gunshot wounds, not smoke inhalation, but that doesn't make it any better. They're dead, and they're not coming back.
Was there any tension around the settlement money that Ronnie had just received? That's a lot of money, $200,000. People die for less every day.
Not that we were aware of. Dad was generous and loving. Connie was so sweet. They trusted everyone.
Okay, let's talk about Sean Cox, our person of interest, whose name keeps coming up. So he was at the scene of the crime the very next morning, very early, correct?
My brothers found Sean on my dad's property. He had one of the dogs. He claimed it was on his doorstep that morning. But they caught him going through my dad's shed, going through my dad's things the very next morning. When I confronted him a year later, he cried, told me he was a good friend of my dad's, but we never heard of him ever.
That doesn't add up, especially if no one in the family knew who he was before that day. Now listen, do you know if law enforcement ever seriously looked into him? Because when I interviewed him, he seemed really guarded. He really did.
The first detective, Ed Miller, told me he talked to Sean. He said he sat down for dinner with Sean and his wife, and afterward felt there was no way Sean did it. And that was it. End of investigation.
Well, now that sounds more like a social visit than an investigation. Really? You mentioned something about a polygraph.
Yeah, I asked Sean if he'd take one. He said, if I'm ever questioned, I'll get an attorney. Look, he was blowing up my dad's phone almost every day, and weeks before, my dad called my mom asking for me. Said he was scared of someone named Sean, some guy who wanted his $200 back over a lawnmower.
So there was a clear pattern. Tension building, frequent calls, your dad feeling unsafe. Now, you eventually met with Sean in person, didn't you?
Yes, in a Wendy's parking lot in Columbus. Same thing, he cried, claiming he was close to my dad. But we knew everyone my dad associated with out there. Sean wasn't one of them. If Sean took a polygraph and passed, I'd owe him an apology, but I'd still want to know what were all those calls about. Why did my dad feel so threatened?
I'm just really curious if the Perry County ever truly, really investigated him. Christy, in your opinion, what was the biggest mistakes that law enforcement made?
Declaring the fire accidental right from the start. They wasted valuable months.
So, what do you think? Do you think that there's any evidence out there that could still make a difference? I mean, there's touch DNA. We have a lot of new tech. What do you think?
I'm not sure what's left, honestly, but phone records absolutely need a fresh look.
If you could change one thing about how this case was handled, what would it be?
I wish they had actually cared, investigated everyone thoroughly instead of just pushing it aside.
It's frustrating, beyond words. Now, Christy, before we wrap up, what do you want people listening to this to remember most?
That two wonderful, innocent people moved to Roseville to enjoy their retirement, but instead were brutally murdered. Their killers are still out there, free, living life as if nothing happened. We deserve answers. I just want to say thank you so much, Christy, for all your efforts and hard work. I really appreciate you taking time out of each of your days to help our family bring this case to light. I truly believe spreading this story across social media can finally push for justice.
Oh, Christy, you are so welcome. It's an honor to help you and your family. But you guys, you and your family are the ones that's doing the hard part for real. You're reliving it all, day after day. But I want to thank you again, Christy, and we're hoping for justice. Folks, if you were moved by what you heard today, take action. Share this episode. Sign the petition that's on our Facebook group. Demand answers. Because the longer we stay silent, the longer this family suffers. The Collins family has waited 18 years. Let's make sure they don't wait one more. As always, be safe, stay alert, and never stop seeking justice.